Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back to the channel. Today we have a slightly different type of video for you. We're going to be talking about the uphill climb that Hollywood has for the rest of the year. That's right, even the major studios right now are having not exactly the best circumstance that they've ever experienced. You've got 5 major studios, all of them are kind of behind the 8 ball. Only Paramount is hanging somewhere in the center of the balance sheet, and you have, of course, Universal, because of Odyssey, doing better than many people would have expected. Now, I just have to say this. I'm not surprised. You shouldn't be either. The Odyssey was always going to perform better than we expected. It's just, did we expect it to perform this well? And I think for a lot of us, maybe we didn't. There was so much controversy going into it. And look, there's no reason why it wasn't controversial. You had some stunt casting, if for lack of a better way to describe it, along with an interpretation from a renowned, well-known feminist that a lot of people just weren't going to be all that interested in. And ultimately, that led to where we are now, which is a successful film, which is successful for Christopher Nolan, but will it be for Universal? And all of that doesn't matter, because it's not who we're really here to talk about. We need to talk about where Disney ends up here and where it goes from that point. So stick around, because you're going to be surprised at just how in the hole a lot of these studios are. Here we go. Now, before we get started, just a real quick reminder, I'm trying to get to 50K. Your help would be kind by just double checking you're still subscribed. If not, do me the kind favor of hitting the subscribe button. It's absolutely free. Then hit the thumbs up button, and then, of course, turn on all notifications with the notification bell. It makes a huge difference in whether or not you see my material, and it makes an enormous difference to every channel that you appreciate. In fact, many of them are not being seen right now in the algorithm, and that's a real problem. Now, first, let's start with the mid-year reality check, which is kind of what this whole video is about. And it is one that needs to be made for Hollywood. There's a lot of volume, but there's not a lot of profit right now. That's the thing that Hollywood's suffering through. The climb ahead is massive. And as of late July 2026, as you're watching this video now, the studios have collectively generated billions of dollars in ticket sales, but the underlying economics of the theatrical exhibition isn't really being realized. It's a very sobering tale to tell. With the industry standard exhibitor splits roughly 50% of domestic box office and 40% of the box office from the international, you're looking at some raw grosses that are a poor proxy for the actual earnings of each of these studios as far as studio cash is concerned. So when production budgets and marketing costs are subtracted, the studio's rental share, which is, well, not significant, is only essentially reflected in only 2 of the 5 major distributors that are opening, or operating, I should say, in the black. That's not a lot. You're looking at Disney with more than $3 billion posted in worldwide grosses year to date, claiming the first studio to cross that threshold this year, sitting in a major deficit, somewhere between $415 million and about $350 million, or somewhere in there. Universal is the clear leader in the clubhouse on true profitability, and Paramount is essentially neutral. And we'll take a look at those numbers in the charts that I'm going to show you. But Sony and Warner Brothers are deep in the red, and I don't think there's a good way out for them. And the scoreboard as of July 26th, which at the time of you viewing this video was just a couple of days ago, Universal Pictures had generated approximately $3.13 billion, passing Disney, but not by a whole lot. The global ticket sales, while investing roughly $975 million in production and marketing, after you calculate in the splits, the studio's rental share sits near $1.165 billion, which is pretty good. I mean, ultimately, they were able to get $190 million in profit out of their theatrical releases, and that's only so far. The Odyssey is going to carry even farther as we get deeper into August, and it'll start to fall off next weekend because of Spider-Man Brand New Day. So let's just be a little realistic. Now, the key of all of this was disciplined budgeting. The Super Mario Galaxy movie, the Michael Jackson biopic, and the other films that were associated with it cleared well over $1 billion worldwide, specifically Michael. And it more than covered any shortfalls from the beginning of Nolan's release, although that's really being erased right now. But the real shortfall came out of Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day, which was a complete disaster and probably something the studios don't want to repeat. Now, Paramount Pictures is operating under the Skydance umbrella, and maybe Warner Brothers Discovery will be that way as well. But it has kept their exposure even tighter. That's right. You had a $30 million scary movie reboot that grossed $230 million worldwide, generating enough rental income to erase losses from two underperforming, also mid-budget titles, leaving the studio essentially cash neutral with a small $2 million profit. That's pretty good in today's dollars, especially for the studios, which right now are all looking very red. Sony Pictures and Warner Brothers have struggled. Sony's limited 2026 slate to date is anchored by an underperforming 28 Years Later, the Nia DaCosta film, which that particular Bone Temple produced $128 million deficit on very modest volume. Not a lot of people went to see it. Warner Brothers is lacking any title that has crossed over $150 million globally. In fact, if you take a look at the very much underperforming Supergirl, they're in big trouble. They are roughly $348 million after very heavy spends on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and Mortal Kombat 2, which really didn't have the earnings that they were expecting. Disney's numbers can look impressive on paper, but on the surface, with more than $3.02 billion worldwide, they're largely driven by one film, Toy Story 5, at $1.021 billion as of the time of this recording. Residual 2025 holdovers helped Disney a little bit, but the rest of the 2026 slate looks a little rough after applying the same 50-40 splits that we've been talking about for years and subtracting the $1.85 billion in combined production and marketing. Well, the studio's theatrical rental share, more than a little disappointing, at roughly $1.39 billion, leaving them in a hole that is not insubstantial, somewhere between, as I said, $415 million or somewhere near $385 to $350 million, numbers that can be disputed, but not for much longer. Universal Pictures, again, on just a $975 million spend, is out there in front. The road to break even by year end requires a substantial gain in theaters, and nobody has the titles to do it except for maybe Disney. The 5 major titles that are available for Disney, as far as their standalone films remain, well, you have Super Troopers 3, which is a mid-level film, The Dog Stars, also a mid-level film, and of course the animated Walt Disney Studios Hexed. The Avengers Doomsday, which arrives on December 18th, is the last big swing for the fences, and that may or may not have some kind of influence. The combined estimated production and marketing outlay for those films is $1.1 billion. In other words, they have to recover a lot more money. You add that to $415 million in deficit, you're looking at Disney needing to make up approximately $1.525 billion in additional studio rental share. That's hard to do. If you look at the 50% split, you need $3 billion more dollars, roughly $3.39 billion more dollars if all things were to shake out the way they are right now. I'm just going to say $3 billion because there's a decent chance Toy Story continues to perform and maybe Moana makes up a little bit of ground. But in global box office from the remaining 5 films alone, Disney's in terrible trouble. These mid-tier films that I talked about before, Super Troopers 3, The Dog Stars, Whale Fall, that's a weird adventure survival. Those films aren't going to cut it. They're not going to make up the difference. In fact, they'll likely lose collectively somewhere between 30 and 40 million more dollars because nobody's going to go see them. It is possible that Hexed does better than expected and clears $500 million in overall performance, or even more. It is possible, but it really is going to fall on top of Doomsday's head to settle all the debts. And in $6 billion worth of earnings, which is likely what we're going to end up at the end of the year, can Disney make up the shortfall? There's a good question in that. If it performs even as anticipated after its global spend, it needs just $1.15 billion to deliver a studio share equal to $2.55 billion, which would put it in line with Endgame. In fact, they're re-releasing Endgame with some extra minutes to try to get some additional revenue and try to convince you have to see the film again before you can go and appreciate this new Doomsday film. So they're giving you more homework. And I don't think that works in anybody's favor. In fact, what the numbers actually mean is something I think that they're actually terrified about. And that's the last thing in summary that we're going to talk about. It's not simply that Disney spent way too much, which they do regularly and have since the boom eras of 2018 and 2019. This is a structural demonstration that the old 2.5 times rule of thumb that we've been using, or a lot of people have been using for oh so long, really doesn't reliably predict the studio profit anymore. You can't look at that as a rule of thumb at all. If anything, it's an outlier these days. Most of these films need to make 3 times what they spend in budget because of how much they're marketing for and how much more it costs to market. Once you start to see more realistic splits with exhibitors and the marketing inflation that I just mentioned, you look at things like Universal and Paramount and understand why they've stayed solvent in an era where Disney just looks to be embarrassed. By simply capping their budgets at those two studios, they have kept their relative returns, relative, and keeping them in the black. But Disney is generating cultural and box office volume at a scale that no rival matches, and yet they go on to complain about Warner Brothers Discovery merging with Skydance Paramount, which still wouldn't even catch up with Disney. But does the volume of films actually convert into cash, or does it convert into losses? I think we can see here quite clearly that we're seeing an awful lot of losses. And that's the biggest problem, is that Disney doesn't see the handwriting on the wall like maybe you or I would. We're looking at what is legitimately one of the biggest disasters that Disney could have been presenting to the world for this entire year. And even Warner Brothers and Sony are trying to go out there and illustrate the opposite failure mode of insufficient scale, because they really haven't released a lot this year. They don't amortize or even moderate their spends, which is a problem. And if Avengers Doomsday can deliver the next necessary $2.5 billion plus performance, and Disney finishes at 2026 at a solvency level that I'm going to tell you I don't expect, they're going to carry $500 million or larger deficit into 2027, which I don't think it's going to be able to make up. The rest of the industry is looking at the same math that we just did, or that I am, and is coming to the same conclusion. To date, we're well over $7 billion in global ticket sales, and we likely will finish well above that number for the year. But the real story is not who sold the most tickets. It's who kept enough of the money after the theaters took their cut. And that's the real question at the end of the day. And with that, I leave you this. Folks, do you think Disney's going to be able to overcome this substantial deficit? Do you think that the right path forward is what Universal is doing? Or do you think that Disney, with some spending changes, might be able to recover a little more quickly? Do you think that the success of something like Odyssey and a lot of its woke elements might create another situation where studios dive headlong into the politically active ideology that put them in this hole to begin with? Or do you think they ignore that message for the first time ever and decide we need to make actual capital, we need to make good things? It's a good question, one that I have for you. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, or any other thoughts that you might have about everything that I just presented. As always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya. Just hopefully at a good movie sometime the rest of this year.